All right. With that, I am going to call the Capital Planning Committee meeting to order for Monday, August 15th at 7:30 p.m. All members are present. I am assuming, I didn't see any minutes, so we're going to skip over our first item. That would have been record time to have a set of minutes ready, but
didn't get those done, sorry.
quite all right. I am going to skip item 3 because I expect there to be more conversation around that, and go to item 4 with Chief Achilles, and we'll come back to item 3. So I'm going to go to item 4, request for addition to capital plan, fire, police shelter relocation for radios. So I am going to bring the chief over. While I do that, I think the consensus was that at our last meeting, we did want to take a formal vote on whether or not to add this to the capital plan. I have since forwarded the documentation that was sent to advisory, as well as me from the chief on the necessity for this and why they're making the request now. And, Chief, welcome. I don't know if you have any opening you want to give before I just let the committee ask you questions before we take a vote.
Yes, real briefly, and good evening, everybody. I sent some pictures and hopefully you reference them because sometimes it's hard to understand the radio communications components. The site that we're talking about is our primary site. And we had some problems last September. We were made aware that the shelter that holds all the radio equipment that basically serves as our primary receive and transmit site was leaking. It was basically structurally unsound. There was tarps placed on all the expensive equipment in the shelter. We were doing some legwork to figure out who owns it, how to fix it. And it was exacerbated this spring when a mouse chewed on the fiber optic in that shelter and took down our whole system. So we accelerated our plan, and we were hoping to cover the funding for it out of the FY 22 budget. And that was between IT, police, public works, and the fire department. We weren't able to do that, and the largest expense, and I'll give Jason Montijo a lot of credit, was trying to get fiber moved. So the expenses that you see, approximately $16,000 for the fiber move and $8,000 to move all the radios. So it needs to be done. We're trying to accelerate this before the bad weather again. I think over the last few weeks, we've noticed that the importance of having emergency communications that is consistent and reliable. So we're trying to move this along. That's it.
I'll just open it up to questions. Go ahead, Joe.
Chief, just for public clarification, about how much is the equipment in the shed, the value of it?
It's probably between $50,000 and $70,000.
Thank you. Oh.
Are there any other questions? I'm just going to, Chief, I know I've asked you this when you submitted it to me, but just I think it's helpful for the committee and the public to know. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion related to regionalization of the dispatch operation. Can you just clarify what impact, if any, that would have on the need to do this project? I.e., if we were already a regional operation with someone else, would we still have to do this?
It's hard to speak on that because right now we're not committed to a regional dispatch or emergency communication center. So this needs to be done now, not in lieu of that. If we were a regional dispatch center with multiple towns, this might still be a critical site that needs to be maintained, but the funding might be generated at different means than from one single town. So again, if I thought this was not an emergency, it wouldn't be moving forward this fast. We also know that, it's an interesting site because it's the Dell EMC site. We're working on ensuring our continued residence on the tower and in that site. I wish we had other options, but this is really, we need to make sure this site's good.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Thanks, Jason. Just a kind of a follow-up question to what was in the packet. So has advisory taken a position as far as the funding source for this? No. Okay. I didn't know if that changed from potentially reserve fund to otherwise.
No, I'm not aware of them taking a position. And then I also know that the chair of the select board has also asked some questions around the licensing in terms of agreements, which I think is outside of the four corners of this committee. So I'll let them continue down that path with the chief.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
So procedurally, I know that this needs to be done ASAP. What would be the quickest path, though? I know we're trying to figure out if it's a capital item or reserve fund. So I know that things like this, you really don't have a lot of time, or you don't know when you're going to need it, and that's why it's so important. So I don't know if there's an opinion on which path is the quickest path to get the funds needed to secure the repairs. I guess that's part one. And part two, I did have a question last week from Mark on ambulance fund. I don't know if he's not here, but that's something I was interested in hearing more about, if that's an option.
I would be concerned at an ambulance fund because it's police, fire, and public works. And a significant portion of this is coming really IT. So I would hate to use the ambulance fund for this if it's because it's across many departments. It's not just the fire department's radio. And, I don't know what the direction is going to be. Sometimes that's beyond my purview, but we were trying to absorb it in last year's budget, and unfortunately we weren't able to do that. That's why it's not on capital. We thought we had enough funds to cover that. I think a reserve fund transfer would be appropriate. That way, if we can absorb the funds throughout the year, then we're good. If not, then at least it's identified. But Jeff, I'm with you. Is that it's we're on borrowed time right now. It's a very convoluted and challenging thing we've inherited. And I'm just concerned if we have another significant weather event or something that damages that equipment, this is going to be a much, much bigger and more expensive problem.
Thanks, Chief.
Is there any other discussion on this? All right, so I'm going to try to make a motion that's within the four corners of what capital can do. And then we, Chief, can support you in any way possible with the other discussions that likely need to occur. So I'm going to motion that the Capital Planning Committee support the Chief's request to relocate the radio shelter at the Dell EMC site per the details submitted in our packet, and that the Capital Planning Committee work with the advisory chair and select board chair to help them understand the importance of this, to move it forward as quick as possible, but no later than inclusion of a capital warrant article at the special town meeting in October. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
So Chief, I don't want it to go till October, but I think worst case, if the other boards that sponsor articles want it to go to town meeting, I think there's a variety of sources, general fund, free cash, which we should have some, and Jeff, I think the chief's response on ambulance fund is valid, but that still is an option. It has been done before. I'm not saying it's the best practice, but has been done for radios before. So I think we can all put our heads together and try to figure it out. But I think the first thing is let's get it on the capital plan.
Can I just add one thing to that, Jason, too?
Sure.
With potentially been looking at it for a special town meeting in the fall. The warrant closes beginning to mid-September. So there's not a huge window to get it on the warrant to begin with.
So there is a capital placeholder on the warrant.
Mhm.
And, Mark has assured me that if this can't be resolved, it can go within that. So it just has to be codified in terms of the exact item in the description before you is all sign it. But there is a placeholder for capital, which is sort of the intent behind my motion, because it's already there.
Yep.
So any further discussion on this? All right, so we're gonna do a roll call vote. Brascio,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Shoner,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
and Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. So that's unanimous, Chief.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys' support on this, and hopefully we can move this along. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You bet.
All right. Let me get Karen G in here, and we will go back to the continued discussion related to roads. Hi, Karen.
Hello.
Welcome back. Thank you for your work since the last meeting. Regardless of where we go tonight, I think I hopefully speak for the whole committee in terms of the thoughtfulness of what we asked you to do. I understand it was a not an enviable position to be in. Probably made no friends by doing it, but obviously we are appreciative of the work that went into this, including the pictures and some of the support. I think what's in front of us tonight as a committee is I think we have three paths forward. We can accept Karen's recommendation as is. We can accept Karen's recommendation as with a modification, as long as we remain within that 1.3 million-ish target. Or we can say we're not ready and don't have enough details and put the bid process off to the spring, which may or may not be a reality based on just some of the factors that Karen outlined. So I do think that is, a potential path if people are not comfortable moving forward. But I, don't have a strong view which way we go until kind of hear some of the deliberation. So I guess, does anyone have any initial comments or questions on the memo that was submitted? So go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. Hi, Karen. Thank you so much for putting this together. A lot of work went into it, and I wanted to thank you. I have a question and a comment, I guess. So as I looked this over, the only road that kind of surprised me that wasn't on here is Lover's Lane. And I know there's a big 7 to 10 year out project potentially to do the water mains. But when I look at the roads, that road is like one of my top 2 roads as being in horrific shape. And a lot of people do use that road. So can you just take a second and explain why, as you went through your process, why Lover's Lane may have been taken off and the reasoning for that versus some of these other roads on here?
Sure. I kind of expected that one. So with the way we deal with the roads generally, so if I only had 1.3, this is the contract that I would let, which is obviously partly why I think people want to have public comment in it. So we all agree Lovers is in horrible shape. The problem is that you put money towards it and it really is going to be in horrible shape again in probably 2 years. Right now, we can take roads that aren't that bad but definitely need work and definitely are not good, and hold them, I guess the bang for your buck that came up the other day, right? So you can take something that's decent and make it good. We're already at bad with lovers, right? So we're already there. So that's the reasoning behind it, is that we're already there. We could do it next year. We're not, it's not going to be, if we do a Band-Aid this year, that Band-Aid is going to do equivalent next year, right? It's not going to make really a difference if we wait a year. The road's already bad. And I do think, since we are talking more about projects and everything, that it's time to really look at something like that and what we would do, and look at putting money into it for engineering and figure out a design for drainage, and then really work on that with the road. And then, okay, we're going to put a Band-Aid on, but let's do that next year and get some design money for it. And so that would be something, maybe we could use the chapter 90 that we get in FY24. So we'll get that next spring, that we could maybe use that for instead, because to put the Band-Aid on is fine. But again, something that is that will hold together for a good 15, 20 years is now going to suffer for one more year. And that's really the reasoning that we do. I do it that way. I believe the pavement management will kind of do that too, the road management, the software, because it does have the algorithms where it says investing $70,000 in this right now is not worth 70,000 at this point. Either, you're not going to get 70,000 that you're going to get on a better road. That
Okay.
makes any sense.
It does. So let me ask one more question, a follow-up then based on that. So when I look at, say, Chestnut Hill is in very poor shape as well. So the work that you're suggesting on Chestnut Hill isn't a Band-Aid. That is going to be a fix that, 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, we're not going to be in the same place we are now. And the only reason I ask that is I compare the two roads. Yes, one has going to have water main work done under it, but when I look at and again, I am not an engineer, I am not a road person, but when I look at the quality of those two roads, they're comparable to me as far as narrow, winding, cars that go down it. So that was an awful lot. But so is Chestnut Hill a Band-Aid as well?
No, so Chestnut Hill, because it's a hill, actually, right? So we are reclaiming that road. So we're going to reclaim, we'll put a crown in. There are swales on the side of the road to collect the water. So when it rains, it'll shed off. It goes on the swale on one side, or it goes off onto the lower side. So a reclaim on that road will actually last. Now, what I was talking about, what the Band-Aid for Lover's Lane would just be an overlay, right? So it just overlay a layer of pavement. It really doesn't have the hillside. If you're driving Lovers, right? If you go off the road to the left, you're going to bang into the hill. In most places, you're not going to go into a swale. If you go off to the right, you're going to fall off into someone's yard. So that road really needs an actual drainage system, and reclaiming it would give it shape, but it just holds the water on the uphill side, right? And if you super elevate, then you're just casting it down onto people's property. So we kind of need, like I said, it needs drainage. And so that was a real Band-Aid. Chestnut Hill, that's not a Band-Aid. That's actually that's what we will do to a road, and then not plan on really having to do much for 10, 20 years.
Okay, that makes complete sense. And just one thought, not even a thought, I guess it's kind of sort of a question as well. So when we were talking about roads last time, you had said, or maybe when I had talked to you offline, that sometimes you have to do some maintenance on a road in order to spend the money now, versus if you wait 5 years, it could cost 2, 3, 4, 5 times as much to do what we're doing now. Because I know there was some questions on people from the public that I had heard from the last meeting, talking about specific roads and, why is that road being done? This road is so much worse. So is that an accurate statement to say that sometimes to do the maintenance now will end up saving the town money 5 years down the road if we don't do it.
Yes, so some streets that, so based on the amount of traffic on a street, right? So if you have a lot of traffic on a street, so if you look at like Hammond and Cottage, right? We can do an overlay or mill and overlay that doesn't have a lot of traffic, so that's gonna last a lot longer on there.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to do a reclaim. So that plays into it too. You let that keep going, you might need to reclaim, right? And then now you're talking that cost plus 4 inches of asphalt plus moving the material around. So it labor and asphalt costs. So that it sort of enters into it that way too. And that's why Parkerville's really at that point that and obviously I don't think anyone's questioning doing Parkerville, but but you know, much longer with that, and it was on the list before, like I was planning on doing it actually, and then the trench was going to be done, and I said, well, if you're going to put gas main down here, obviously we're not going to, I'll put off. And we're really at that point that we're pushing doing an overlay versus a mill and overlay instead of a whole reclaim, but that road has such bad base, the reclaim's not going to be as good as it would be if you did it on Newton Street.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Again, thank you for all the work that you did on this. Thank you for your explanations. And I'll just add by saying, I hope that the new software, when it comes in, recognizes that Lover's Lane is still a problem road. So again, thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Lisa. Good, Jeff.
All right. Well, thank you, Karen, for putting this together. I had the same comment as Lisa on Lover, so I'll skip over that. But just 3 other questions, comments. And I just mentioned Parkerville Road North, which I don't disagree with, but I wanted to understand, you know, with potential for a new school being built over there, what impact all that heavy machinery will have on a new road, and will that take away the potential lifespan of that road? Does it make sense to wait based on that?
Yeah, yes and no is a bad answer. So the problem with a lot of times on the main roads, if like Oak Hill is a very good example. When I wanted to pave that, but we were having some issues, and that that 40B, the couple units, those townhouses were going in or were planned. So we were able to put that off, but that was going to be a whole reclaim. Now this is where we're really milling and overlay. We might not get as, it might take a little bit of life out of it, but the next time we do Parkerville after this anyway, we're going to want to reclaim it again, and probably maybe even pull away some of the water table's high. It's a rough road, but we might want to put some we might want to make it a project, but I don't think it's really not quite that point yet. And I think even with the heavy equipment and with being able to go from it's not that long of a distance, right? So it doesn't have to take the whole road. And the part up by from 9, if they're going to be entering from 9, which would most likely be the case, we would be probably trying to get them to enter from 9. That end would it would hold up better than the lower side.
So how many years do you think this adds?
Parkerville's not in great shape, but I think if we were able to crack seal that in 7 to 10, and then maybe do a chip seal on it, which people don't love the chip seal, but I would think we're good for at least 15 years before we are going to see enough that we might say, maybe we're going to want to overlay it one more time, and try to get another 10 out of it. But like our overlay this time might get 15. Our overlay next time will only get like 10.
All right, so it's 15. So if we were to have, just play for it, if we have all that heavy equipment on that road coming from 9, like what would that come down to from your best estimate?
It could, just because of yeah, basically rutting and everything. It might come down to being more of a 10 to 12 year
Okay.
with that. But I mean, I don't think we're talking 5. I think it'll be in okay shape.
Okay. All right.
Jeff, we're 3, 4, 5 years away from even probably having heavy machinery
Okay.
there.
Okay. Makes sense. The next question I had, just the Parker Cottage Hammond. I'm pretty familiar with those roads over there. In Old Cornerville, I saw on the other sheet that that's going to be where the potential cross connect or interconnect will be. So how did that play into your decision in terms of adding it to the list?
So one of the things with that is that because of the way the neighborhood drains,
Yeah.
it's good if we can keep those streets all kind of paved at the same time to keep it moving. If Hopkinton does happen, that little piece would end up like you said, it's going to get dug into, but it's a narrow enough road that an overlay isn't basically, if they want to do a lane, and I think they probably would do more than a lane, but if they were only going to do a lane width, that's pretty much almost the road.
Okay.
So we'd be it wouldn't be much for us to just do an overlay and get them to do the whole road. Because that trench, we would let it sit and we would overlay it. And I do think if you mill and overlay that and you started at the right elevations, right, and everything kind of already flowed well, then we'd be okay. It's the problem we have right now is if we don't do something to it now, it won't necessarily all flow well, because that road's it's because it's in better shape a little bit. It needs to almost be brought down so that everything moves.
So if you do all 4 of those streets and then the intercon connects or cuts into just Old Cornerville, will all of the streets need to be redone again?
No, just so because everything would be kind of flowing well at that point, you're going to cut in, but you're going to pull the road down by milling it and then matching it up to those roads. Right now, it's going to be a hard match to match to that road, match those other roads to that road.
Okay.
Because it's just enough out of shape that it creates a problem.
Right. All right. And then the last question I had is just on William Onthank. Just Lisa brought up the whole bang for a buck comment that was from last week, and it's one road that's almost $400,000, right? So I know that I saw the pictures. They speak for themselves, but is there anything else you consider that may have more widespread impact than a William Onthank, which is $400,000 just for one road?
So if we had more than 400, there's definitely other ways we might want to spend it. But so the thing with Onthank is that because it's an elderly, a senior living community, we really got to make sure those sidewalks, right? So we have to do that piece. It was never, they went bankrupt and the town took it over and tried to finish it. So it was never really finished to spec. So it's sort of something that to some level, I feel the town has some obligation to get the people who live there up the road up to what it should be for a resident of the town, because they never had that, right? But also it's got the infrastructure in place already, and it's just a matter of making everything move to the infrastructure. $400,000 doesn't get us far when you have to put the infrastructure in place. And so that's where the I mean, I know it's a neighborhood, but we won't really probably need to go back to that neighborhood, especially for the community that's there and the amount of traffic it's going to get. We're easily not going to have to touch it, maybe a little crack seal in, at some point, but it's going to make it 30 years, and that'll be a 30-year fix on that road, I believe.
All right. Well, thank you for your responses. Appreciate it.
Karen Wheeler.
Yeah, Karen, thanks again for joining us tonight and picking up some work in between our meetings. Just on Lover's Lane, that makes sense to me, around, why it doesn't make sense to do that work now. I guess my only remaining question is, when do you think that work will be under consideration for doing?
That's something that I believe we're probably going to have to, we need to start bringing this forward as, and I know they're talking about looking at sidewalks and everything and kind of looking at the complete streets. And I do think that these few roads that we know have issues, which like Pine Hill, which I think they do want sidewalks on that, but Lovers, where they really need, they need more work because they need infrastructure, right? They need the drainage. I think we need to start almost make a priority list of that. And now the town hasn't really been, the Main Street was like the first real project we've done in a really long time. I'm not sure that we'd ever really done except putting the sidewalk on Parkerville since I've been here. So when I started, that started right away, and there really was nothing else in the works but Main Street. So I think now that the town's a little more open to this idea of doing some projects and spending some money, and now we're looking at Corderville, but I think Lovers and Pine Hill need to be talked about, and we need to get a priority list going, and then definitely, okay, look, let's put the Band-Aids on to keep them until the time, but then at least we'd have an idea of when we wanted to touch them, and we really don't have that right now. So I think the conversation needs to start, needs to start at the selectman level, and then be and just kind of okayed or put through the capital plan, right? And then at that point, then they need to be vetted out through like Corderville's being vetted. Does that help at all? Horrible answer. I'm sorry.
No. Yes, that's very helpful. But it sounds like a long process. Sounds like a multi-year process. Is that your thinking?
So a little bit, yes. So I think bringing it up now and looking at doing the engineering design for both Pine Hill and Lovers makes sense to do with next year's chapter 90, and then have the roadway money that we get each year that we kind of put together. You're probably going to end up spending some of that on pavement management money, on the software. You're probably not going to really do much paving next year. I wouldn't think, unless I know people are talking about bonding. I'm not sure how that works. I think bonding a project isn't a bad idea. I think bonding pavement maintenance is not necessarily, because it's not I think people think pavement's so permanent, and it's really not. All right. So whereas a project where you're putting infrastructure and drainage in, that is something that's an asset that under asset management you could work over for a long time. So at least getting it started, and then at that point, if we get started and we know if it's worth a Band-Aid, just do an overlay to kind of keep it smooth enough. So it's, and partly a lot of these roads come to me, or I check them extra, because the crew said I'm having a problem keeping it scraped during storms, or geez, we've put an awful lot of patch on that road this year. Let's go look at it. So between that, calls we get, and then just driving each road to check, you get to the point you're like, all right, we might be in good enough shape that putting it towards engineering would make sense, and let's just do that, and then not necessarily bond, but put some money aside for maintenance again the year after.
Okay, thank you.
Joe?
Karen, so what you're saying is that we'll do Lover's Lane next year? Is that what we're saying?
No, not at all. More that it would be worth looking at the design end of Lover's Lane next year, right? So we have a good idea of what we want to do when we come through with a capital, with like the water main. Okay, so when we go to dig up, I mean, we've all been on Lovers, right? It's super narrow. We go to put the water main in, the whole road's open at that point practically because it's such a narrow road. So it's a time to really put in drainage. But if we had the design ready and we also look at our priorities through the water master plan, we can get those to tie in at the same time. And even if we move the water main forward a little bit, if we go through Hopkinton, if we do the Hopkinton thing, that improves a lot of our system and changes some things, right? And so
Yeah,
then we might,
My understanding though is that you said that a water project would be 7 to 10 years out.
it should be.
It should be. Okay,
However,
well,
we could move it up if we wanted to, right? Because it's an important project. So a lot of times, I mean, we have in the past moved a street paving up, or we've moved a water project up because the street was about to be paved.
Are we then advocating to move up the water project? So not to do Lover's Lane in the next, say, 3 to 4 years with the intention that we're going to do water project. I'm only bringing this up because I know that there's been talk already on this board and we have lots of people advocating and we're talking about it as the worst road in town. So if we're going to talk about it this way, I, as part of this committee, feel irresponsible for not putting it on a priority list for when we're going to do it, not if we're going to do it. And right now it sounds like an if. And I think that as far as we're all concerned, I think we should be putting it on a when. And I'm not putting pressure on you in the sense that I'm telling you to come up with it. I'm saying that I'm asking you, if we're going to make it a priority, how do we do that? What timetable should we use? And how can we complete this?
So we should make it a priority and we should do Pine Hill, right? With and get a design going on it. Lovers, then at that point, if we think, if you could put a Band-Aid on it next year, just like we would maybe do this year. It's not super expensive. It's just a very long road. It's narrow, but it's very long, right?
Yep.
So it's not a
I've
cheap
driven on
Band-Aid.
it. It's got plenty of bumps.
Yes, right. And we spend a lot of time out there trying to smooth stuff away. And but because there's no drainage, it's never gonna be right.
Okay.
So
Yep.
to put that and say, okay, next year, any leftover chapter 90 we use on it would be, I think, a reasonable thing to say, regardless of how the road maintenance money goes. We know we're gonna get chapter 90, put chapter 90 to that road and then look at design. I think that's reasonable, but to spend anything on it beyond a Band-Aid, I don't think makes sense until you're really ready to, I mean, it's a $1 million project, that road, in reality. And so is Pine Hill, right? Where you're really looking at, you've got to get that drainage in there. You've got to get the permitting done, a lot of wetlands. So, and the width is not, there's.
So if I said there's $100,000 more to flush things over there, you wouldn't do it.
If there was an extra $100,000 and everybody was like, hey, we just can't live with it like this anymore, that's fine, right? Because you do it, it would, in 2 years, you'd see the wear already. But that's going to happen regardless if we do it this year or we do it next year, right? So it's not, I mean, and it is a very bad road. And like I said, the way I tend to look at sometimes, I don't know if all of you were here because John Boland was still here at the time. So back in somewhere in the 2000 to 2005 range. Pine Hill looked like Lovers. And at that time, what we did was we did part and then we did the other part. We broke it into two. But what had happened is that it hadn't been done because it had been looking like that for several years, but it was already bad. So it's that same idea, like rather than the amount it was gonna cost to actually fix all of it. And again, we didn't put the drainage in, so it didn't, obviously why it hasn't.
If I
happened.
lived on Lover's Lane and
Yeah.
I wanted to get my road done, would I be advocating to get the water project moving so that we could then finish it and get the road done?
Well, yes, that would be helpful to get the water done and you get the drainage in. But I think to be able to just do the Band-Aid and do the overlay of it would really be, that's really what you need to start with, right? And that not what you need to start with, but we're gonna have to do that before we have a design ready. Like, we're not gonna, they could get a design
Mhm.
done next year, but then you've got to go to town meeting, right? And you've got to, and you've got to have
Yeah.
open meetings, right?
I
So you're
understand all
still
that.
to, what?
And I understand that, and
Yeah.
I understand your plan that you put forward. I'm just looking at it from their perspective, and we're living on the worst road. I want them to understand from watching this meeting what they need to do to get their road into shape, and what the steps are that they should be pushing for to do that. Because I don't want them to come back to us as the worst road in town and saying, why can't we do this? And
Yes.
so and my questions to you are really advice to them as to how we can proceed to get their road in the best shape possible as fast as possible.
I do think then their best, the best thing to do is to advocate to get design money going and to make sure that there's enough roadway money to at least Band-Aid that next year. With the intent that we could definitely, it is likely that we could add it to the current contract if we got money.
Okay. All right.
I hope that helps.
No, I'm sorry it took so long for me to just express that, but that's the way I feel. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, just kind of a follow-up to Joe. So if we're gonna potentially Band-Aid it next year, is there something on your list that we could put off until next year, that one more year isn't gonna hurt, and do the Band-Aid now with the realization that Lover's Lane in the next, realistically, by the time you engineer it, you go through all the, everything that's going on, you're probably looking realistically 3 to 7 years out. So is there any opportunity to potentially pull one of these streets that another year isn't going to be ideal, but it's not going to be detrimental at the same time? And you could say, no, there's nothing on that list that we could do that with. Okay, but I'm just going to ask.
And Karen, before you answer that, you're on mute, Karen. But before you answer it, it might be actually good. I want to I haven't fully gone with my thoughts yet, but I want to ask a few confirmation type items that may help us go with Lisa's question for a second. Are you definitely, if we were to approve some subsection tonight, are you definitely going to go out to bid this fall?
So if the decision was made tonight to do something, then yes, I would.
So the select board, of course.
Yes,
doing what they need to do from a Chapter 90 perspective.
Yes, because I believe that the town, it seemed like everybody really wanted to try to pave this year. I have my questions about it, mostly because fuel prices, right? And as the escalation and what we're going to get for bang for our buck. Because I'm estimating in this $99 a ton. We usually bid our roadway maintenance is usually 68-ish. But I've asked around, and I think 99 is what we're going to be looking at, which is crazy. So putting off is not a problem, but I know that based on how much pushback I was getting from all different committees, boards, select board, everybody, people want to get stuff done this year. So with that being the case, yes, I would definitely bid it. I'd be happy not to and wait to spring, see how we did and see if new money came.
Okay, so then if that's the direction we continue to go, you can always reject a bid if it comes in 110, let's just say, and you're just like, I cannot advocate, right? The select board can still accept it, or they can reject it, and they may have to pull things off. But I think, can you just outline one more time how change orders work on this? Like in terms of, if, let's just say we went with your list exactly as printed, and it comes in at 1.1 million. You outlined Davis and Ashley is the next one, and then we've heard a ton of discussion tonight on Lovers. Could you just add those in if we had the funding available, or how do the change orders work with paving contracts? Because I think it's different than other bid processes with change add alts, because I think we'll go back then to Lisa's question.
So if pricing came good, and we have extra, extra money, so hey, look, we have $100,000. Yes, as long as it's less than 10% of the overall contract, we can put that in, right? So that shouldn't be a problem, because we're over $1 million, so $100,000 is not a problem. I always bid when I bid, and we all have to, right? You have to bid automatically an escalation charge, but it's also funding available, right? So if there's not funding available, once you get low bidder, you are allowed to say, all right, we don't have enough to do this whole contract, but we're going to drop this out. And you can negotiate with the low bidder once you've bid if you're going to remove something, or so there are some obviously rules to it, but they are similar to what other ones are. The 39M stuff, which has to do with DPW stuff, it's standard. So we could put extra on there with the intention that we know we're not going to be able to do everything, and just say, and we don't have to be an add alt as much as just, funding available. These are our main roads, and then we're looking at these ones also. We just have to make it clear through the specification that we send out.
Okay, so let's go back to Lisa's question. Do you need Lisa to repeat the question? Do you remember what her question was, Karen?
I'm guessing that, no, actually here, she can answer. Good.
Yeah, so basically, I'll make it shorter this time. I'll surmise it this time. If we were to take and put Lover's Lane on here, is there a road that we could put off a year on here that wouldn't create an expense or an issue with doing? That wasn't as eloquent as it was the first time, but close enough. You're muted.
So I was trying to look at the pricing. So I think that's $97,000 was the estimate on that for a Band-Aid. So we have a couple of options. And again, this gets more back to the Lover's Lane kind of thing, actually. You could pull off Chestnut Hill Road. It's already in bad shape, right? It's already there. With the intention of putting that back on at a later date, because again, there's not a lot of homes on it. It is a major cut through, don't get me wrong. But it's not, it's something that, and I mean, you could try to do, you could pull a neighborhood that's only 100,000, right? I think the Cottage Street area is in that range.
Harris is also in that range.
So right now, Harris is one that is really falling apart. And we're going to get to the point that we won't be able to fix that soon without a reclaim and pave. But for now, we are able to, I think we're going to be able to hold it in place much better if we do it. So I wouldn't pull that one. But maybe the little neighborhood could wait, or again, I think kind of the easy pull, which I know doesn't seem easy to you guys, but again, a lot of it comes down to, I'm kind of used to getting the heat for these things, is that if you pulled Chestnut Hill Road, it granted it's a lot of money, but by pulling that, we're reclaiming and paving that, right? We're doing a permanent fix. You can permanent fix it 1 year later. It's not going to be a big problem because the fix next year is the same fix as this year. It's already at that point. It needs the big fix, right? It doesn't need drainage because it's hilly enough. It'll work itself, but it's already at the point that it's deteriorating enough that the fix has to be major, and the major fix isn't going to change. We're not going to need to add something new next year.
Okay. I was hoping that wasn't going to be your answer because it's trading the worst for the second worst. So, just one question on Chestnut Hill, and I probably asked you this before. In reclaiming Chestnut Hill, are there trees that are going to have hearings on?
So we don't tend to take down trees to reclaim. I think there were already some on Chestnut Hill that were heard, I believe.
Yep.
So we wouldn't do anything more on that road as far as removals. I mean, it's a narrow road. One thing we might eventually look at is if a tree is in the swale and creating too much of a problem. But I think those have mostly already fallen.
Okay. And this really isn't a discussion for capital. I had you here and we were talking about it. All right. Thank you.
Go ahead, Joe.
Two quick questions. First one is for both Lisa and Karen. Has the approval gone ahead to go and fix Northborough Road? That's a yes? Okay,
Yes.
so we're already funding another bypass of that same area.
Yes. So we're gonna have that. That should be. Right now, we're waiting on the submittals to be approved. The first set, they had a couple issues, so they had to resubmit. The contractor did. So if they get approved, then they're planning on doing that work. It shouldn't take long. It's only like a 3-week job for them. And that should be done this year by, I would think, the end of October at worst.
Okay.
And once that happens, then then you can go around Chestnut Hill easy enough.
Right. So that sort of 2/3 of that Chestnut Hill Road really isn't really necessary in terms of using it as a bypass around that area, which I think people somewhat did it when Northborough Road closed. The other one was, if the pricing holds, as you say, per ton through into spring, would you advocate in the spring that maybe we're going to have to up our budget allowance year to year? So, I mean, would we have to go up $100,000 a year to make sure that we could cover road maintenance?
I should hope that this isn't going to sustain, right?
I hope not.
So, if one thing with road maintenance or with pavement, so there's an escalation, but there's also a de-escalation. So, if when we bid it, right, we're going to bid, and the liquid asphalt tonnage price is going to be, I think if you saw on the emails, I had that. I think we bid at $552.50 or $555 a ton of liquid asphalt, and now it's I think it's 800. It was 800, I think, in July. So I mean, that's significant. Usually a 5%. If it's more than 5%, it's gone up. Then you end up paying the escalation. But if it goes down more than 5%, they have to give that back too. So if we bid it now and they're not paving, the day they pave, what that rate is, or so that month that they pave, that's what counts. So even if we bid it now and then in the spring it goes down a ton and it's great, then we'll get more asphalt for that same amount of money.
Okay.
Right.
And yeah, so I mean, in the spring, you're anticipating it probably being a little bit better.
I'm hoping,
correct?
yes.
You're hoping.
I
Okay.
think we're all hoping, right?
If it's not, just yes or no, you would anticipate that we probably need to increase the road budget if it doesn't go down. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
All right, so maybe following up on Lisa's question about Chestnut Hill. So you second worst road versus first worst road, or the worst road, not first worst, but worst. So to me, priority almost seems like Lovers over Chestnut Hill. So if you were to do that, just playing it forward, that frees, if you take off Chestnut Hill, that frees up $200,000. And then if you add on Lovers, that's about 100. So just wanted to get your thoughts on how you'd feel at 100. So if we need to make a decision on that.
Well, she's already over. Let's just be very clear. The total number in here is 1355.
Available funds though is 1.4 though, right?
Karen has advocated that we do no more than 1.3. Is that correct, Karen?
Okay, never mind. I'm good.
And that's due to just all this contingency talk. You know, she needs to have ability to flex within a future contract as well as existing contracts the town already has. So go ahead, Joe.
Well, then does anybody have a problem with swapping out Chestnut Hill for Lovers?
I have a thought. I don't have a problem with it, to answer your question. But I would like to see us maybe go with a more expansive list than the 1.3 and just see what happens at bid. And potentially know that we may have to make a tough decision. Like I'm basically, yes, I'm kicking the can on one thing at least here until we have bid results. I don't see the need for us to beat ourselves up over one road for another right now and make a tough decision. If that's really what we're between, I cannot support anything that does not include Lovers for the main reason that I think we all know how long it takes to do any project. And no matter how much traction, public support it has around it, we also have to remember we're bringing forward potentially a $3 million Quarterville Road project this year. We're not going to be able to stack $1 million projects in consecutive years unless all other departments are taking years off from capital. And Karen, I'm sure you have other DPW related capital items too that, right? So I think we need to be realistic as much as I think we'd all love to just get everything caught up. It's just not possible. And this is why I think we see a lot of discussion at the state level about increasing Chapter 90 funding and increasing other sources of funding. 200,000 of this that we're using for funds, just as an example, is a new program that wasn't even in existence before this year, right, Karen? That's like the WARP program or whatever it's called. So clearly the state is trying to figure it out because we're not the only municipality dealing with this. So I would advocate that if the consensus is to include Lovers, that we don't touch anything else in this list unless there's something on the list that you just don't think needs to be done. If there's something we think doesn't need to be done, let's pull it out. But if we think that this list is whole, let's go out to bid with this. And if we end up in a bad bid situation, then we can meet with the select board and they can decide whether to accept, reject, or alter the scope of what's in there. And I think we can reference back to this discussion about potential alternatives, right? Is the alternative to remove Chestnut Hill? I heard that. I heard someone say potentially some of the ones down at the bottom of the page. Or is there another option that we're just not thinking about? Or do more funds free up potentially between now and actual needing to expend them because some of these other projects finish and Karen can release kind of the reserves that are around there. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't know what the committee thinks.
Second.
Did you second? I didn't make a motion.
I know. I was just seconding what you said.
Karen, does that make sense?
Yes, yep, absolutely. We
Okay.
can definitely, I mean, we can add lovers in easy enough, and then if every ton we add into the contract, we might get a little bit better money anyway, right? So, it's worth a try, and the worst case is we just then have to pick.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, if we have to pick, Lovers is staying on, is
Yeah.
actually going in the chart. And
Yep.
I'm not a mind reader, but that was the general consensus of what I heard, which is why I was quiet for so long. The other thing, Karen, that I will do and copy you on is I know the school already did Finn, but they have Trotter up this year too. So I don't know the status of their reserve funds. I don't know if have you talked to Keith or Greg about this yet?
I did talk to Keith a little bit. So they really just want to do right now, Trotter back. I keep calling it the basketball court, but I think it's not a basketball court anymore. Used to be, but he thinks they need some drainage, so they need some design work. So I don't think they're just looking for a flat pavement this year.
Got it. Okay. So we won't get any tonnage from them, it sounds like.
No.
Okay. And then you all remember, Mark is also exploring the golf parking lot, which would not be from these funds, but it is a capital item. I don't know if that will factor into this or not. That's up to him and Tony, I guess, the golf committee to decide how you're going to advance that. Okay. I do have some comments on Stockwell, Jeff, but I'm going to save them until we get through this discussion, given that no one else has brought up Stockwell. So I'm going to take public comment on anything we've talked about to date. I'm seeing none. So now, Joe, I will try to formalize that into a motion so you can second it. So I am going to recommend that the capital planning committee put forth a plan to the select board to go out to bid this fall per the memo from the DPW superintendent with the addition of the Lover's Lane scope. Is there a second?
Second.
For purposes of discussion, I will expand on that. That will also include in there, obviously, the discussion that's occurred here. And I would also advocate that we potentially get a second opinion on Lovers in the short term, really to just validate the Band-Aid. Right? I don't think anyone likes the use of the word Band-Aid, but I think Karen is being realistic with what it is. And just see, is it a 2-year thing? Is it a 5-year thing? Karen, I think that's in all of this discussion, I think all the recommendations would probably have been made with and without a pavement management. I'm sure there are other roads that probably would have come into play that we aren't considering here. But I think, I forget who said it now. I think you might have actually, Karen. The consensus that we've heard from the town is we need to start doing something about the roads. And I candidly don't think we're in a position that we want to wait, but I do think if there is a second opinion, we can get around how to deal with Lovers and just make sure everything we've been relying on in this conversation can be validated from an external source. Not that we don't trust you. I just think it will add a lot of credibility if we have to make a tough decision down the road. Does everyone have any thoughts deviating from that? Okay, so we had a motion, we had a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, let's do a roll call vote. Brascio?
Aye.
Hark?
Aye.
Palmer?
Aye.
Shoner?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye.
And Malinowski's aye. Jeff, I want to make one comment on Stockwell, so I'm going to remove you for that, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
All right, so purposes of the minutes, Jeff has been removed to the attendees for now and it's not here. I just wanted to follow up, I believe it was Mr. Tobin that made a very impassioned plea for Stockwell last week. And I know he's been spun in circles. I also of the personal belief that a cul-de-sac sidewalk, candidly, in terms of priorities, as awful as it is in the condition it is, candidly just doesn't weigh up to the prioritization of the items we just talked about in terms of, we used the word bang for your buck. We talked about some really situations that have been deteriorating. But I did want Karen to explain to this committee, because I don't think we had time for it last week, the potential short-term solution for that, which I don't believe is a capital item, but it just needs to be said publicly so that Mr. Tobin knows that there is a path forward, but it's not a permanent path forward. So Karen, can you just explain some of the conversations you've had prior to it coming to capital? Because I don't want it to seem like capital's passing the buck on this one, but obviously we just had some difficult decisions to make all in itself. And, maybe we can help steer Mr. Tobin in a different direction, maybe without the cost considerations that we were facing last week. So can you just outline what you explained to me?
Yes. So when I first looked at the Stockwell sidewalks, and that was from a concern of Mr. Tobin's, the problem we have there, and I think this is what you're talking about, is that the trees that are planted are between the sidewalk and the curb, and the roots are creating the problem with the sidewalk. The option I had given that doesn't cost anything except labor for us, like the DPW, because we're able to do this, we could pull up the sidewalk, right? And then loam and seed, right? That just the cost alone basically at that point, and disposal of the asphalt. And he did look into it with his neighbors, and that people evidently overwhelmingly wanted to keep the sidewalks. But we could do that now. I mean, the idea for that road to make a permanent solution rather than messing with the tree roots is actually that when we go to pave the road, the road's 25, 26 feet wide. We can basically build the sidewalk over the road. The roots are already under the road pavement at that point. We're 6 inch higher with the sidewalk, and the trees could stay. They shouldn't affect the sidewalk anymore. There'd be loam on the back side of it, and the sidewalk would be against the road. But that wouldn't be worth doing until you're going to do those roads. But you could peel up right now and put loam and seed down, with the idea that it is a wide road and people can walk on the edge of the road and be fine. We could even paint a white stripe to try to make it be, that people stayed in the fog line.
And it probably goes without saying, Karen, that if the neighborhood were to rethink kind of their initial thoughts on that it would have to go to planning, and planning would have to weigh in on that, because I'm sure the sidewalk was part of an original subdivision plan.
Probably. I'm still not all the way clear, because I had talked to planning about that before, and they said, well, if the neighborhood was okay with it, there wouldn't be a problem. So I'm really still not sure how long the subdivision plan goes into things, and like if it's forever, because walls fall down and stuff and they don't get necessarily repaired. So I'm not sure when things can be changed or not on a subdivision plan, but yeah, we would go to planning on that, I think.
I mean, I think it's safer just to go and have the discussion. And of course, the neighborhood may or may not support it, but I'm trying to present a path forward if they're very concerned about it. But obviously, I don't think that road's ready to be paved. So go ahead, Joe.
So my understanding was from prior conversations, the alternative is either to cut roots get permission to cut roots on the tree and then reestablish the sidewalk in place, or essentially basically just pile over it and raise the level of the sidewalk with pavement. Is that correct? Sort of as alternatives?
So the the money that I had in there, like $30,000, was really just to overlay on it. And then you're gonna put some loam on the sides because you've got elevation shifts, right? You'd bring down the high spots, but there are roots there, right? So that pushed it up. You'd take the asphalt down right there, but the root's right there and you're just gonna really be paving over it. What the neighborhood had gotten a price for, and unfortunately, everything's prevailing wage for the town, so the prices are not the same that you would get if you asked somebody for a price as I would get. That we would peel up the sidewalk, they would cut the roots that are under the sidewalk, and then we'd have to reestablish the sidewalk. Well, that has to have a contractor. We don't have the ability to pave a sidewalk.
Right.
So that's where it came to. Originally, I was like, well, we can definitely pull the sidewalk up and that doesn't cost except labor, right? So it's just a project DPW would do. But I can't do anything more than that. It has to be through a contractor.
So yeah, so the cheapest alternative is just to lay more macadam right over it.
Yeah,
And,
unfortunately, yes.
Yes. Well, that's what of course, that's what I figured. So it was slapping more on top. How long would that fix likely hold in place? I realize that the trees grow at the rate they grow, and I'm asking a really difficult question, but
I know, honestly, it's not a dumb question. I just wish I knew the answer. I don't.
yeah,
I'm not sure.
okay.
Yeah.
So what we're really saying is, unless we want to slap more pavement on top of it, it's for the neighborhood to decide a better solution.
Yes.
Fair. Thank you.
So what I would recommend on this topic is, unless the select board changes the path forward for what we have motioned, that I'll work with Karen and Mark when he's back to get some sort of communication to Mr. Tobin on, this is where you're at. In an effort to move forward, if the neighborhood rethinks the sidewalk plan, our recommendation is that you write something to planning and get on their agenda to discuss it further. Planning then supports the loam overlay, then it would come back to Karen for execution and obviously be outside of capital. But I feel like we need to close the loop, but unfortunately, I don't think we are the solution as of right now in terms of a committee. Does anyone disagree with any of where we're at? Okay. Anything else for Karen before we let her go? Karen, thank you. And we will copy you on the correspondence, and I'm sure there'll be another meeting on this, the select board.
Thank you very much. Have a good
Thank
night, guys.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. All right. With that, I will go to any public comment. Okay. In terms of meeting schedule, I think we need to resume to a Monday cadence. I'm not aware of any topics that should require our attention until after Labor Day. So I'm presuming no one has a burning desire to meet again before we get beyond Labor Day. So I would propose we do the 12th, unless some topic comes to my attention before then. Are there any thoughts on that?
Sounds good.
Sounds
Sounds
fun.
good.
Okay. Any other business anyone has? All right, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.